Hi, I'm Nush from Why Be Aligned, and for this week's Movement Monday, we're going to be looking at the oblique muscles. When we talk about obliques, a lot of people just think of them in terms of abs or trying to work out, but they actually play a role in our structure as well and in our alignment. If we can't move them well, or if they're very stuck and tense or short, we're not going to move well throughout our body and our spine. We have two sets of oblique muscles. Let's go and have a look at them. The first set is our external obliques. You can see them here on either side of the body, and they attach from the bottom 8 ribs. They go along, attach onto this central part of the abdomen, which is called our rectus sheath, and then they actually attach onto our pelvis, and it's on this section here called our iliac crest. We then have our internal obliques. Now these attach again onto our iliac crest, but also a ligament that runs from here to here called the lateral inguinal ligament. They'll run along there, attach up onto that rectus sheath again in the center of the abdomen, and over onto the underneath of the bottom 3 ribs. In order to get movement into those oblique muscles, we know we're going to have to move some bony structures. So as they attach onto the rib cage and the pelvis, if we move those, we're going to get some good lengthening and shortening through those oblique muscles. I'm going to be using my jumper to show you what the muscles do as my bones move. But these are essentially the movements you want to try in order to get movement into the internal and external obliques. So to get a shortening in both sets of muscles, if I tilt my ribcage forward and down, and if I tuck my pelvis underneath, you can see how all of these muscles are shortening. The fabric is gathering on my jumper. Whereas if I tip my ribcage upwards and back, and I tilt my pelvis forward and down, I'm getting a lovely long stretching at the front of the fabric. So this is called a posterior tilt of my ribcage and an anterior tilt of my pelvis. They are moving away from each other. And then if I anteriorly tilt my ribcage, which is bringing it downwards, and then I tuck my pelvis underneath, which is our posterior tilt, that's when I'm getting the shortening. So it's this movement, opening and closing. In my frontal or front-on plane, in order to get movement into both the internal and external obliques, I'm going to be doing some side bending. I'm simply going to have my arms down by my side, and I'm going to slide one arm down the thigh, and you can see here this is bending my spine. It's called lateral flexion, and it's tilting my rib cage down on that side. The bottom of the rib cage is coming down. When I do that, both the internal and external obliques on that side shorten. You can see the jumper gathering, and then they lengthen on the other side. As I come to neutral and then slide down on the other side, you can see the jumper lengthening on this side, shortening on that side. So this is the contraction, and that's the real lengthening of the muscles. So you can use this side bend movement, the tilting of the rib cage, to stimulate those muscles. In our rotational plane, although we will use the same movement in order to stimulate both sets of muscles, they will be doing a different thing when we turn in the same direction. So essentially what we're going to be doing is rotating our rib cage round, left and right, but we're not moving our pelvis. If we move our pelvis, then nothing moves in the internal and external obliques. Whereas if we just move our rib cage, you can see the fabric on my jumper moving. So for our external obliques, this is my left-hand side. We know that the obliques run from the ribs through onto this central rectus sheath. So if I'm rotating my rib cage to the right, the ribs are moving closer to that central abdominal line, and therefore the external oblique is shortening. Then when I rotate to the left, because this is moving away from here, it's lengthening. Whereas with my internal oblique, we know that it runs here from this pelvis through onto the central line again. So if I am moving my ribcage to the right, I am pulling that away from each other. So therefore my internal oblique is lengthening. Whereas when I rotate my ribcage to the left, it is shortening. So my left external oblique, when I rotate to the right, shortens. My left internal oblique, when I rotate to the right, lengthens. You don't need to learn that, but it's just so you know the difference between those muscles. So those are our oblique muscles. We now know we have 4 muscles. We have 2 internal and 2 external. And we know we've got an internal and an external on each side of the body. You've also been able to see how when we move our rib cage, we can really stimulate length and contraction into those muscles. And in our sagittal plane, we also saw how moving the rib cage and pelvis in opposition to each other really gave maximum lengthening or shortening in the muscles. And hopefully you've had an idea of why those muscles are important. They're going to be supporting the structures above and below and giving us that maximum movement in our waist area. After all, there's no point doing a load of Russian twists in the gym if you're just moving your pelvis and ribcage together. Now you know that you need to be moving that pelvis away from the ribcage or the ribcage away from the pelvis. And that was this week's Movement Monday. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you can catch next week's episode. And it's a thank you from Pedro.